Hi, my name is Alex Casano, and I'm the events coordinator here at the Clearwater Historical Society. Today we'll be having Michael Casano. He will be speaking about the history of vinyl records from the Space Age era. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. My name is Michael Casano. The presentation is entitled Mai-Tais and Martinis on the Moon. Records from the Space Age Lounge, or vinyl records from the Space Age Lounge. As I said, my name is Michael Casano. This presentation is going to be about music from the Space Age era, which is generally 1950s and 1960s. It bled a little bit into the 1970s, but pretty much that's what we're going to be covering today. Normally we associate 1950s with rock and roll, rhythm and blues, but there's a lot of instrumental music that came out in the 1950s. Most of it winds up in thrift stores, and then I come along and get them. Actually, this stuff's become quite collectible over the years. As a matter of fact, if you go to thrift stores lately and look for records, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find anything decent. A lot of the thrift stores are actually selling stuff online, things like that now, which is fine. It's all about the thrill of the hunt, really. So I love dollar bin record shopping and thrift stores and stuff like that. I don't buy much online anymore because I simply can't afford to. The record prices have really gone quite through the roof. We're going to be talking about technology developed through the years that's led to basically the recording industry. I'm going to do that briefly, but I'm going to plow through it because it's basically going to be about 150 years of information in about 15 minutes. And then we're going to talk about all these records I bought with me today. Basically, we have the exotica genre. It's usually put like Hawaiian music, Polynesian music, but that even is incorporated music from Africa, Middle East, Far East, India. That kind of got thrown in there too. And then the Space Age music, which is Space Age themed music that you'll see. It's kind of interesting to me. I have a background in electronic music. I used to write for obscure music magazines that nobody's ever heard of, that are all long gone. So I always had an interest in instrumental music, classical music, jazz. I have quite a vast background in music, but I kind of latched onto this stuff. I found it very interesting, so I figured I'd share it with people. So with that being said, welcome to the Space Age Lounge. Just a brief introduction about myself. I've been actively collecting music for over 45 years and passionately listening to music for over 50 years, and really in my head that makes me sound so old. You know, I'm like, wow, it's a long time, 50 years of listening to music. But you know, I joke about that I graduated from obsessively listening to my recording of Peter and the Wolf when I was a child. I had this little record, I used to play it a lot, to graduating to listening to Led Zeppelin on 8-track, but that's a bit of an exaggeration. But my first record I ever purchased was the Boogie Nights 45 by Heatwave. I don't know if you remember that, in 1976, with my own money, and I still have the record. I didn't bring it with me, but I do have it. I am a writer, self-proclaimed thrift store musicologist, semi-retired DJ, Bandcamp archaeologist, as well as a lifelong student of art, music history, and history in general. I'm a small business owner, husband, and father, and I am commonly referred to as Alex's dad. Okay, so like I said, unfortunately my printer didn't work last night, but I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to be fumbling with papers, so I'm running off the phone, so just bear with me. We'll start in 1876. Alexander Graham Bell transmitted voice by means of electricity. Sound can be converted into electrical signals, and electrical signals can be converted to sound, basically the telephone. His colleague Thomas Watson invented the bell ringtone. I'll get it right. Thomas Edison, 1877. I've seen 1878, somewhere around there. He invented the phonograph, and the earliest models of the phonograph used a paraffin paper, and then Edison later used a metal cylinder wrapped in tinfoil. Basically, a needle engraved the sound waves or the vibrations into the tin foil, and then it would be able to be played. 1896, Thaddeus Cahill invented the telharmonium, which is an early electric organ. And then in 1901, you had Guglielmo Marconi broadcast the first transatlantic radio signal. In 1904, the U.S. Patent Office granted Marconi a patent for the invention of the radio. Leo Theremin invented the theremin. The theremin is an electronic instrument. I'm sure you've heard it. You might not have seen one before. Clara Rockmore became the first virtuoso, probably the most celebrated one in the theremin too. The theremin is a looped horizontal antenna that controls the volume, and is a vertical antenna that controls pitch. And I've seen Clara Rockmore perform like classical music on this. It's incredible. She was incredible. But this is the only instrument I'm aware of that you physically do not touch. It works on waves, electric waves. I don't have the science behind it. I'm really keeping this quite simple. In 1928, he sold the theremin patent to RCA. In 1928, Maurice Martineau invented the home Martineau, which is essentially a combined keyboard with the principles of the theremin. 29, we saw Lawrence Hammond invent the Hammond organ, which is very, very popular. It was first manufactured in 1935. 1930, RCA pressed the first 33 1/3 RPM LP on vinyl. These were used for radio stations to play pre-recorded commercials. So it wasn't until later that we started seeing them on the market. 1930, Terman and composer Henry Cowell invented the Rhythmicon, which was an early drum machine. In 1935, AEG introduced the K1, touted as the world's first practical tape recorder. 1936, the Dobro Company released a commercially available Hawaiian lap steel guitar and electric amplifier combo. So this was the first time where somebody could take a guitar, plug it into an amp, and perform with electrified sound, amplified sound. Which is interesting. I found this out, and I didn't, this was a recent discovery for me, but despite Hawaiian music becoming very popular in the United States in the 50s, it was extremely popular in Greece in the 30s, as far back as. This particular record, I don't have this record, I have the MP3 version. They released this in 2017 as Mississippi Records. There actually is a vinyl version of this. This is Kostas Bizos and the Whitebirds, and it's a Greek-Hawaiian hybrid. It's very, very interesting, and the recording is quite good. The sound quality. I was actually shocked how good the sound quality is on this thing. Back in America, in 1937, American jazz guitarist Charlie Christian began to use an amplified guitar in his performances. 41, we had Georges Genis invent the Angeline, an electronic keyboard instrument later popularized by Jean-Jacques Perry. 1945, RCA Victor introduced the commercial availability of 78s made from shellac. Now, I believe there were records before the shellac records. I think they might have been made of glass, perhaps. But the shellac records, which predated the vinyl records, came out in 1945. Raymond Scott, I'm sure you're all familiar with his music. Probably not, but you are. Raymond Scott was the inventor. He was an inventor and a composer. He started Manhattan Research Incorporated, which he used to invent electronic instruments and compose electronic-based music. In 1943, Scott sold some of his compositions to Warner Brothers. The Warner Brothers studio composer Carl Stalling eventually adapted Scott's compositions for Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. So if you've watched Bugs Bunny, you've heard Raymond Scott's music. Even though he didn't write directly for those cartoons, it was used in there. Raymond Scott introduced the orchestra machine in 1946. In 1947, we had the Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash, which started the American obsession with flying saucers and visitors from other planets. This event triggered the imagination of the general public and could be considered the catalyst for Hollywood's newfound film obsession, science fiction. 1948, Pierre Schaeffer developed a compositional style called musique concrète, which used field, voice, and instrumental recorded sounds on reel-to-reel tape. and then you could play them at different speeds. You could reverse the sounds, you could superimpose them, you could splice them to make new compositions. It was actually probably one of the most innovative compositional tools to come out of that era, and it's actually probably still had some effect on today with some of the music coming out nowadays. 1948, Columbia introduced the first 33 1/3 vinyl LP for commercial consumption. And in 1949, RCA Victor introduced the vinyl 45. I didn't realize it before that the 45 was actually out that early. 1953, composer Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. I really put him in here because I love saying Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. Begins working at an electronic music studio near Cologne. These electronic music studios started creeping up all over in Tokyo, in Europe, and even the United States at Princeton. It was basically these hubs where composers would come and start just messing around with electronics and coming up with interesting compositions. 1956, Raymond Scott patented the Clavovox, which was a keyboard synthesizer. 57, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik into orbit. This is certainly the catalyst for the space race. 1958, RCA introduced the first tape cartridge for general consumer use. 58, H.H. Scott Incorporated introduced the first stereophonic receiver. So in 58, we started seeing stereo recordings coming out. Everything prior to that was mono. 59, RCA Mark II synthesizer was invented by Harry Olson and Herbert Ballar. Raymond Scott in 59 developed the electronic sequencer called the Circle Machine. It's funny, unfortunately Raymond Scott kind of died in obscurity. He never really got his due. Even today, there's a website that's devoted to his work. But I mean, this guy, he should be talked about more in American music history, and he's just not. I don't understand it. 1963, Philips introduced a pre-recorded music cassette. So back in 63, you could actually go buy a cassette. In 63, Oscar Sala composed electronic sound effects for the Alfred Hitchcock film The Birds using his updated version of the Trautonium. 1963, the Mellotron was developed, manufactured by British company Bradmatic Mellotronics. 64, we had Robert Moog and Herbert Deutsch developed the first Moog synthesizer. In 66, those Moog synthesizers became commercially available. And in 1982, Philips and Sony co-developed the compact disc. So that's the end of the technology stuff. I just thought it was kind of interesting to kind of put things into perspective here. A lot of developments over time. And we're going to start with the recordings, but the first thing I'm going to be talking about is actually not a recording. It's Kon-Tiki by Tor Heyerdahl, which originally was published in 1948 in Norway. In English, it was published in 1950. This book was very, very important in terms of the whole tiki culture, and it really started people, I think, with the imagination. And that's this music, that's the golden thread that ties all this music together. It's all about fantasy and imagination, and this book was instrumental in kind of starting that off. This actually is from 1950. It's a really beaten up copy. Now, if you're not sure about what Kon-Tiki was, Tor Heyerdahl wrote about his expedition, which he, in a small crew, sailed 8,000 kilometers from South America to the Pacific Islands of Tuamotu on a handcrafted raft. He wanted to prove that it could be done, and he proved it. And that's basically what that book is about. So let's start with the recordings. This actually is not a vinyl recording. This is a 78. This is a shellac. This is 1950. I hope there's no glare on it. Uma Sumac, voice of the Ekshtabe. She had a 5-octave vocal range, which could be quite disturbing. I mean, she can go from like high note to Mariah Carey in a very short period of time. So it's she had exquisite talent there for vocals, but it was a little bit of getting used to. But that album was produced by Les Baxter, and he wrote most of the songs on there. And who's Les Baxter? This is Les Baxter. This is probably one of the most important tiki records This is Ritual of the Savage. Came out in 1951. Let's see. This is actually the 1955 reissue that I have here. He also released Music Out of the Moon back in 1948, which actually saw the use of the theremin on the recording, which is interesting. This one here, this is Otto Luning and Vladimir Ushashevsky. This was actually a concert that was recorded in 1952 at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This record actually came out in 2013, so there's been no release of this recording until then. It was basically an exhibition of electronic music at the time. So it's actually pretty interesting. This is Gil Malay. He's a composer, jazz guy. This is the Gil Malay quintet and sextet on here also. You can start seeing the obsession with the atomic stuff and science fiction stuff coming about. Gil Malay was actually quite interesting. He went from just doing regular jazz to probably he's most notably known for the soundtrack to The Andromeda Strain, which is a movie in 1971. It was all electronic music. And he developed the percussitron specifically for that movie. There's actually a short video on YouTube, about a minute and a half long, he talks about it. It's fascinating. I wanted to talk about Bernard Herrmann. Now, I don't have any of Bernard Herrmann's releases on vinyl, but Bernard Herrmann was an amazing, prolific composer for music scores. His most notable films are that he wrote the scores for Vertigo, Psycho, Citizen Kane, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, Mysterious Island, and a slew of others. 1953, I'm not sure if any of you know this, but there was a movie that was filmed in Tarpon Springs called Beneath the 12-Mile Reef. It was filmed in Tarpon and also parts of it in Key West. Bernard Herrmann wrote the score for that film. He did the primarily the underwater scenes, and it's quite an accomplishment. He used lots of lush strings, and it's very beautiful, and actually it was kind of ahead of its time. This is The Forbidden Planet. This movie was released in 1954. This came out in 1978. I think, actually, they first released the soundtrack in 76. My copy's of 78. What's interesting about this soundtrack was this actually was the very first all-electronic music soundtrack. So, like, there was no instruments on here. It was all electronics. I'm sure you're all familiar with Jackie Gleason. Now, Jackie Gleason was not a composer, but he was an arranger and a conductor. And he took other people's music and made albums. And what's interesting about this one, it's not really exotica, although for maybe Jackie Gleason it was, because he put some different instrumentation on this. He used mandolin and other instruments he normally didn't touch. He was very conservative when it came to music. But Salvador Dali did the artwork for this, specifically for the album. They were friends. Jackie Gleason was even a painter, although I wasn't very impressed with his work, but he still painted nevertheless. And he made a lot of friends along the way in the business. And Salvador Dali was nice enough to do that for him. And it's interesting, Dali actually wrote liner notes for the cover. The first effect is that of anguish, of space, and of solitude. Secondly, the fragility of the wings of a butterfly, projecting long shadows of late afternoon, reverberates in the landscape like an echo. The feminine element, distant and isolated, forms a perfect triangle, with the musical instrument and its other echo, the shell. But that was kind of interesting. Now, it's a little Florida history. In 1956, in December, the Mai-Tais restaurant opened up in Fort Lauderdale. It was actually the longest running tiki restaurant in the state of Florida until But I found out in October 2020 they had a catastrophic roof collapse, which also caused a catastrophic pipe burst. So they not only had the roof to deal with, they had tremendous amounts of water damage. And as far as I know right now, they were going to take about a year supposedly to fix it up. But Alex told me that the place is up for sale. So who knows what the fate of that restaurant is at this point. But it had a long run. It was very popular. I've never been there. But the whole tiki restaurant craze was all over the United States. And there's still quite a few of them around from the 50s. Unfortunately, not in Florida anymore. Although there might be one or two in Daytona Beach. I'm not sure. Bronte and Tiger, soundproof. This is interesting because this photograph was from the set, the film set of, I lost my train, from Forbidden Planet. So they actually used the film set to make that cover. The Sound of Tomorrow Today. And you start seeing some, Middle Eastern themed stuff. This is the Seventh Vow by Artie Basamanian and his orchestra. Another one, Exotic Lands. This is 1956, I believe. 57. This is an interesting record. Sun Ra and his orchestra. Now, Sun Ra is an extremely prolific jazz band leader, pianist. I'm sure he played other instruments, I'm not aware though. This particular record, there was a small pressing of it in 1957. There was a second pressing in 57. This was a vinyl release. I think this was around 2014. And I got this. The first pressing of this record last sold on Discogs for $999. Now some of these records do have a lot of value to them. But you have to take really good care of them. People think they have a pile of records in their house, they think they have a gold mine, but most people have beaten up their records over the years. You're going to start seeing themes like percussion. A lot of percussion records start coming out. This is David Carroll, percussion and hi-fi. Now you think about Exotica. This is the dude, Martin Denny. He released a ton of these types of records. He began playing at Don the Beachcombers in Honolulu in 1954. He eventually got a gig at the Shell Bar in Oahu, and that's really where he started becoming famous and developing his sound. He cited his influences as George Shearing and Les Baxter. So this is probably like one of the most important Exotica records that was released. It was at Liberty. Liberty was the record label. And then also that same year, he did Exotica 2. So there's no shortage of music to listen to from Martin Denny. Good change. Next one's 1958, Tak Shindo. He was a Japanese-American composer, but he was also a musicologist. He worked for the U.S. military as a Japanese translator. He studied composition with Miklos Rosa, who we will be talking about momentarily, and he also researched Japanese music over the years. He was a student of it. This is another important record in terms of Exotica to come out. You're going to start seeing some more of the space-themed music coming out. Now this is Russ Garcia, Fantastica. This is 1958. And some Martin Denny records from 58. This is The Forbidden Island, and this is Primitiva. And then we have, this is Alfred Newman and his orchestra. You start seeing some more Hawaiian themed music now too. This is The Magic Islands, the music of Hawaii on Decca Records. 1958. This is Paul Tanner. He invented the electro-theremin. 2 days after he finished inventing this instrument, they recorded this album. I guess he was in a hurry to get it out on vinyl. This is Andre Montero and his orchestra, arrangements by Warren Baker, and Tanner played the electro-theremin on there. Arthur Lyman was an important guy. He was the vibe player in Martin Denny's band, and eventually he became his own band leader. He was actually on the Exotica record, Martin Denny's Exotica record, and he too is very important in the Exotica scene. He released a lot of good records. This is Taboo. In 1958, we have Jean-Jacques Perry, Prelude to Sommeil. I have the MP3 version. Jean-Jacques Perry, probably more people will be familiar with him with Perry and Kingsley. They released an album, The Sound from the Way Up, in 1966. And it's funny, that album title was used by the Beastie Boys in the 1995 release. Same exact title. I don't know why they did that. I guess maybe they liked the record that much. This was one of those thrift store stories. I found this tucked away as if somebody was probably going to come back and buy it. But this is Esquivel and his orchestra. I love this album cover. It's so great. This is kind of a holy grail in the Exotica space age realm. It's a fantastic record, and it's really in very good condition. I was lucky enough to find that in a thrift store because I saw one in the wild, and it was the album cover, no record in it, and the cover was wrecked. So you just don't see that record in thrift stores too much. Spellbound was a movie by Alfred Hitchcock. It was released in 1945, and Miklos Rosa, who I mentioned before, who was a teacher to Tak Shindo, composed the score for that film. While in 1958, Heindorf, that's what he went by, he performed this music with his orchestra, so they redid it, and they have Dr. Samuel Hoffman added the theremin on here too. And of course there is the Dolly connection with the movie Spellbound. He did the sets for the dream sequence in the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. 1959, August 21st, Hawaii became the 50th state of the United States. That was a pretty big deal. This is another thrift store find, Werner Muller and his orchestra, Eastern Paradise. So you start seeing records that are even incorporating like music from Japan and the Far East and stuff like that. Start seeing more Hawaiian records coming out. This is the Polynesians, Blue Hawaii. (1959), the Guy Warren Sounds. Now, Guy Warren was a drummer from Ghana, and he moved to the United States in, I believe, 1953, moved to Chicago. He was the only musician from Africa that really kind of got into the Exotica scene. And this was a very important record. Wound up, unfortunately, he didn't hang out in the United States too long. He moved back to Ghana and became a Buddhist, which I thought was kind of interesting. I assumed he could become a Buddhist in the United States, but he wanted to go back home. He never really made it too big, but he was an incredible musician. Then we have a slew of Martin Denny records in 1959. Hypnotique, and The Enchanted Sea, and Exotica 3, and Quiet Village, which I'm sure most people have seen that. That you see in that thrift bins all the time. And also Aphrodisia. On 59, Robert Drazen, Voodoo Exotic from Polynesia and the Far East. This was another thrift store find. Alex actually found this. He was looking through some records. He's like, Dad, hey Dad, is this a good record? I'm like, yeah. Yes, that's a good record. I believe last time I checked, this thing can sell for over $100. It's in actually very good condition. And the thrift store we got it at, they had a habit of dating when they put the records out, and the record was sitting there like 3 or 4 days, I can't remember. Nobody took it, so I guess it was my lucky day that day. This is more Arthur Lyman, Bwana A, and The Legend of Pele. This is an interesting story. I found this in a dollar bin in a record store up in New Jersey a very long time ago. Alex was not even born yet. Now, I said I have an interest in electronic music, and what drew me to this record was special electronic effects by Swedish radio. I also love the cover. It's so classy. But I guess somebody dumped this in the dollar bin because they figured who's going to buy opera. This is Karlberger Blomdahl. He's a Swedish composer. An Epic of Spaceflight, 2038 AD. So this is actually, they actually use electronic effects in the opera itself, which I'm pretty sure is probably the first time it ever happened. Although I think Wagner, there was bells that were used electronically in one of his operas. This is Ports of Paradise, Alfred Newman, Ken Darby. Really cool cover. This has got a 16-page booklet in it. Les Baxter, Sacred Idol. This is another important record. I've had this for a very long time, actually. Don't remember where I got it. I think a thrift store. This was a thrift store find. Raymond Scott, The Secret Seven. Once again, pretty good condition. And there's Raymond Scott. This basically is more of a jazz record, but there are some effects on here that he used. He was just a creative guy. All right, we're moving along. This is Exotic Islands, Romantic Lore of. This is The Surfman. It's actually an important tiki record too. This way. Arthur Lyman again. Gilbert, 1959. George Cates, some of you might be familiar with him. He was with Lawrence Welk, and he did a Polynesian percussion record. Which is interesting. Lots of different percussion. And you're actually going to start seeing a pattern here. So that was 1961. 61 seemed to be the percussion record era. Took Around the World in Percussion by Eric Kotler. And Werner Muller and his orchestra, Percussions in the Sky. I love these Phase 4 recordings of London Records. They were always very well done. Put this aside for a sec. Martin Denny's Exotic Percussion. This is all 1961. Stanley Black and his orchestra, Exotic Percussion. And Twilight Zone, this is also 1961, Marty Manning and his orchestra. And talk about Rod Serling and all that good stuff. Polynesia by Buddy Collette, Septet. Buddy was a member of the Chico Hamilton Quintet, and he was also a saxophonist, clarinetist, and a flutist. This is really a straight-up jazz record. But there is a track on there called Polynesian Suite, which is a spoken word, like a story and music to it. And that's really kind of where the Polynesia stuff comes in. It's a really great record, very hard to find. I I think it's at least $100, $150 record if you're looking for the original. I have the MP3 version because I can't afford $150 on a record right now. Oh yeah, you're right, Alex. I'm sorry, but I miss Les Baxter's Jewels of the Seas. This is a great album too. Les Baxter. I love the album cover. This is definitely something I am looking for on vinyl eventually. And it's just, once again, underwater theme music, just lush strings, and it's really, really, really cool. Tilimaneo. This is a reissue. This originally came out in 1962. This is from the Seattle World's Fair. I think they might even have sold this record there. Seattle back in 1962 is kind of touting themselves as the city of the future. So there was a lot of exhibits with futuristic themes. And I think that's where they actually introduced the monorail and the Space Needle that year, if I'm not mistaken, at the pavilion. What's also interesting at that World's Fair is there was a giant tiki statue there. So I kind of thought that was interesting that it kind of combined themes of the space age and the exotica stuff. But that's a reissue. It's a good record. It's the Exotica Suite, Martin Denny, Cy Zentner, composed by Les Baxter, arranged by Bob Florence. And you'll see this in thrift stores, but this has actually got like a, I'm not understanding the tactile need for that cloth to be there. I don't know if you're supposed to rub it while you're drinking your Mai-Tai or whatever and listening to this in your living room, but you can find these records, but normally this is gone in the thrift stores. You don't see that. You don't see that normally on there. So I thought that was kind of funny. Some more space age stuff. This is Strings for Space Age. This is Bobby Christian and his orchestra. It's 1962. And this is mostly spoken word and sound effects, The Space Age, The Age of Reliability, by Rebostis Manhattan Incorporated, out of Passaic, New Jersey. John Daly's the narrator. So there's no music on here. Okay. Bronte and Tiker, Pianos in Paradise. Not much to really say about this. Gene Rain's group, Rains in the Tropics. It's another classic Exotica record, which I unfortunately don't have, but I have the digital version of it. He was a vibraphonist, band leader. It's an important record, like I said. It's actually an interesting find in the thrift store. I found this 45. It's at WikiWatchy, and the flip side is the Ballad of Silver Springs. This was in a pile of 45s. So I was really happy to find it had the cover on it. So some rippage here and there, but it's pretty good shape. The record's in very good shape. It's just 2 songs. It's a promotional release. ABC Paramount. Moon Gas by Dick Hyman and Mary Mayo. This was starting to see some electronic music on here. This is a reissue. Of course, we couldn't have this without the Jetsons. This is 1963. This is actually there was actually a release. This is the second edition from that year, second pressing. Musical director was Jim Timmons, and this is Golden LP. Most of us are familiar with the Golden Books, same company. They have Golden Records too. And some more Hawaiian records. Exotic Sounds of the Surfmen. 1963, Cal Tater, Breeze from the East. Cal Tater was a vibraphonist, jazz, made some great albums in the 60s. And this was his I guess, venture into exotica, if you'd like to call it that. It was a really, really great record. I threw this in here, Ravel's Bolero. Now, he wrote this in 1928, Maurice Ravel. However, this was a big, big influence on Les Baxter. Not this recording in particular. I threw this recording in there because, like I said, I love the Phase 4 records. Just always very well done. But Maurice Ravel's Bolero was very instrumental in kind of prompting Les Baxter to go in that direction. It's another thrift store find, Sir Julian, organ in orbit. Unfortunately, it's kind of got a sticker stuck on there. That was 1965. This isn't exotica, but I wanted to bring it because I love the album cover. This is the original motion picture soundtrack for Thunderball. It's a James Bond movie. Some of you might not know this, but most of the underwater scenes for this film were filmed in Silver Springs, even though it looks like you're in the Bahamas or wherever this took place. But I just love the artwork on there. It's great. One of the classic album covers. You know these guys, the Beatles. Why did I bring the Beatles? Well, Revolver saw mainstream rock music starting to embrace electronics. On 2 of the songs, they used a lot of tape effects on this album. I always said that without Revolver, we wouldn't have Sgt. Pepper's. I actually think this is probably my favorite Beatles record. This is actually Canadian release, 1966. And I got this in a record store. It was like in a dollar bin. And I'm like, I said to the record guy, I'm like, this was in a dollar bin. He's like, yeah, it's not in good shape. I'm like, I checked it. It looks fine to me. It plays okay. So I never understood that, but that's fine. He was being generous. You got Tiki Gardens? Mm-hmm. All right, Tiki Gardens. Tiki Gardens started in 1964 here in Indian Shores. It was a popular tiki restaurant. It had a garden section where you could walk around after dinner. They did a torch lighting ceremony. They had peacocks running around. Unfortunately, now it's a parking lot, which is a shame. That record, Tiki Gardens actually released a record in 1967. It's definitely on my list to try to find, but I will find it in a thrift store someday. Although my theory is that everybody who bought these records probably live in other states. So they're probably all up in Minnesota and Canada and Pennsylvania. I don't know how many are in the wild down here. I've never seen one at a thrift store. Last this sold on Discogs was $560. Tiki Garden stuff is extremely collectible. Even people who never been there before, there seemed to be an attraction to it. I know Alex and I are kind of mildly obsessed with it. Earl Grant, this is not a exotica record. However, what's interesting about this is the album cover was photographed at the Tides Hotel and Bath Club in North Reddington Beach. And Lenny D also did a record that year for Decca, and same model, same photo shoot for his record too. So I thought that was kind of a little interesting piece of Florida history. That was back in 1968. This is an extraordinary record here. This is Switched on Bach by Walter Carlos. He did this all Bach music with the Moog. It's really quite an incredible achievement. I actually can't even wrap my head around how he did this record, but it's really amazing. That was 1968. In 68, we have 2001 Space Odyssey, which is actually mostly classical music on here. Kubrick selected waltzes and ballets and Richard Strauss, of all people. It's very interesting. The movie to me is quite boring to watch, but it's also probably one of the best filmed movies I've ever seen in my life. It's really incredible visually. I always prefer 2010 as a movie to watch. It was interesting. But this is a great record. And that was on loan from Alex because I couldn't find mine that I found in a thrift store. The CD version of that, Turner Classics released a CD issue in '96, and that actually has the HAL 9000 dialogue. So like all the computer voice from HAL is on that CD release. The LP does not have that. This I got in Oldsmar Flea Market back when there was a record dealer in there. I got it for a really good price. Charles Roarnan, Times Zirconium for synthesized and processed synthesized sound. He actually won the Pulitzer Prize for this recording. He died last year, March 2020. Just more fun electronic stuff on None Such, which is a great record label for classical music. Another Walter Carlos record. This is a 1969 Wall-Tempered synthesizer. He branched out a bit as Mach, Monteverdi, Scarlatti, Handel. But once again, just incredibly done. We're kind of really wrapping things up now. I was gonna cap it in 1969, but I did add this. This is a Sven Liebeck, Inner Space. This is originally released in 1973. This is a 2012 reissue. The original recording is selling for like $500. It was an Australian TV documentary, and it's a bunch of underwater themes. The music's quite incredible. And then Sven also did 74. He did Solar Flares. So I kind of thought he kind of got the water theme down, the Exotica stuff, and then he did the space theme stuff in 74. And the only other recording I wanted to talk about was a CD. This is called Ohm, the Early Gurus of Electronic Music. If you're interested in electronic music, this is the collection to buy. It's 3 discs and a 96-page booklet, which comes with it. I unfortunately lost the cover to keep everything together. But it's a great introduction if you're interested in electronic music, just to kind of hear the developments over time. And also, if you're interested in space-age kind of music, Retro Cocktail Hour, I want to give them a shout-out. They're on Kansas Public Radio. They have a website, retrococktail.org. And Daryl is the DJ, and he plays about 2 hours of this music. I think he does a show a week, and he's been doing it for years, and it's fantastic. Really kind of introduces you to this type of music. Does a great job. And then just little references for all the books and stuff I use to put this together. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, complaints, concerns.